I want to make sure we didn't miss that. So, we good? We tracking? All right, good. Let's dive into the business at hand. What does it mean to enter a new season well? When we enter a new job, new relationships, new city, in being that Fort Liberty is here, we get a lot of times that folks come into Fayetteville, they're new to Fayetteville. Yesterday was the first official day of fall, even though it's been fall in my mind for about 2 weeks now, 3 weeks. It's officially fall. Like, we enter into new seasons in life, and sometimes we plan that. Sometimes a new season sneaks up and we don't even know it's going to be there. The question I want us to wrestle with, that we started last week and we're going to for the next several weeks, is what does it mean to enter into a season well? What spiritual tools does God give us so that when we enter into a new season, a new time of life, that we can thrive, that we can find blessing instead of curse, that we can find what God has for us in the new season? How do we do that? And so we started last week by following the Israelites, who were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. We talked about the parting of the Red Sea. And on the other side of the Red Sea, they ended up where? The wilderness. Not where they wanted to be. Right? So we were with the Israelites. They passed through the Red Sea into the wilderness, and they were there for over 40 years. Because they weren't yet the people that God needed them to be. And so if you recall last week, if you look over your notes, there'd be something about that God cares more about who we're becoming than where we're going. Right? God cares about our character. There's character develop in new seasons. But now, the 40 years have passed, and we will wander no longer. My friends, we are going to the promised land. After 400 years of slavery, after 40 plus years of wandering in the wilderness, it is now time. Today we are going to travel with the Israelites as they enter into the promise of God, a promise made starting with Abraham and through this whole line of descendants that led them to Egypt in the first place. The promise of God may take a while, but today it is fulfilled in the people of Israel. The leadership torch is being passed from Moses to the next leader. Anybody want Bible points? What's his name? Who leads the Israelites into the promised land? Joshua, I heard it. Y'all get points. 10 points for everybody. Jenna, mark that down. So Joshua is going to cross from the wilderness in the Holy Land, and we're gonna read this together. It's a little bit lengthy of a passage, but I think we just need to embrace this, because this is a promise that was 500 years in the making. And a whole generation of people suffered and died in the wilderness. They've been awaiting this moment, and it's finally happening. So we're going to go to Joshua chapter 3. We're going to start in chapter 3, and we're going to read to 4:7, I believe it is. So we don't know how many Israelites were there. The numbers, if you kind of dig through texts and the census that come, like in the book of Numbers, there's a lot of numbers in the book of Numbers. Historically, it looks like there could be anywhere from 60,000 to 2 million. That's quite the spread, right? What's in your bank account? 60,000 to 2 million. Oh, wow. That's a big jump. We don't know, but there's a lot. And they're gathered here on one side of the Jordan River, and they're looking to go across into the land, and we're going to read, we'll get these details here. So, chapter 3, Joshua. Looking for the big number 3, right? That's where it begins. Okay. Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites, they set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went through the camp giving orders to the people. It took 3 days to get word out to everybody. 3 days, they gave out the order. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your position and follow. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves. Make yourselves holy and right before the Lord. Consecrate yourselves. For tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and they went ahead of them. Then the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the ark of the covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan waters, go and stand in the river. So Joshua said to the Israelites, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Gershonites, that's my favorite, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. See the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. And as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, the waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up like a heap. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the ark of the covenant, they went ahead of them. And now the Jordan is at flood stage, all during harvest. Yet, as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away in a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan, and they stood on dry ground, while all of Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed crossing on dry ground. Then the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan. The Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you and put them down at a place where you stay tonight. So Joshua called together the 12 men that he appointed, all of Israel, from all of the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of tribes of Israel, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. And these stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. Like, we all know about the Red Sea. Right? We all know the story of Moses parting the Red Sea and them passing through on dry land. For whatever reason, this story doesn't get the same play. Maybe it's a little deeper and we don't read to Joshua. It's 6 chapters in, after all. But it's nearly as miraculous as the Israelites need to get to the other side in the middle of the flood season of the Jordan River raging past them. And how are we going to get these 60,000 to 2 million people across? Not too big for the Lord, who in a similar way from what happened to the Red Sea, heaps up the water, a wall of water that creates dry land as everything ends up trickling then down into the Dead Sea. And they cross on dry land. And then God says, hey, this is pretty important. I want you to remember this. And so he invites them to go take a boulder, right? Put it up on your shoulder. 12 rocks, one from each tribe, from the middle of a river. They should not have been able to get these rocks in the middle of the river, but there stands a monument of God's faithfulness. To remember that God was with them. And so these stones are memorial to the people of Israel forever. Now, as far as we know, these stones are not still standing by the Jordan River. Like, you can't go there today, and I don't know if, I'm sure archaeologists have looked for it for a couple thousand years, but there's no like, oh, those are the 12 stones from the middle of the river. But they did have it written down in the Bible, so we're still talking about it several thousand years later. That was a great move. What's another great move was God moving his people into the promised land. That God had this promise that he made for them, and he wasn't going to abandon them, he wasn't going to leave them, so he brought them into this land that was filled with, well, we hoped, but it's actually filled with ites. Right? The Hittites, Perizzites, the Gershonites, right? All these ites that filled the land, which meant battles ahead. But not today. Not today. Today is a celebration. God cut off the waters of the Jordan to make a way for his people to enter the promised land. So I ask, does God still stop the waters today? Does God still make a way? And when God does, do we take up the stones to remember God's goodness? Here's what I found to be true. That sometimes we need God to help us enter into a new season. Right? Maybe God is calling you to enter into something new. Maybe you just feel it in your bones that it's time for something different. Sometimes something just shows up, or maybe God is putting a calling on your life and it's time for something new. But in life, nothing new that's meaningful happens without a massive change. Nothing major happens without a shift. And God is a master at the shifts. I've experienced this so many times in my life, and you probably could too if I asked you to write down those moments where you're heading one direction and God calls you another, and then you end up in a new place, and you just never expected it. Like, there's been so many times where God has helped me or my family cross into a new season. Times where there was a decision point. But unless God moved, nothing was going to happen. It started with a move to North Carolina. For me, it was like the whole process of becoming a pastor, of going to Duke Divinity School, of our family adopting, of like there's like these stories starting Crossroads North, starting this, like there's all these where we would not have been able to move forward into what we felt God was calling ahead unless God came along and did some heavy lifting for us. And there were so many times where God did clear the way. Do you need God to do some heavy lifting in your life? Are you at the banks of the river wondering how to come across, knowing that God has to show up? Right? And God has shown up so many times in my life, but never has God brought us into the promised land. God's never delivered me the promised land. I don't even know what that would mean. Like there's no place that we go that we don't end up surrounded by some sort of enemies, by the ites around us. But there's been these clear moments where God heaped up the water and made a way. God made a way that we would not have been able to cross had God not shown up. And like Joshua said to the Israelites, you haven't been this way before. So when you enter this new season, go with God ahead of you. What does it look like for God to walk with you into a new season? God makes a way in a passage where it seems unlikely. And what happens when God comes and shows up? God heaps up the waters and says, here's the way. I've made the way. The question is, are you going to take the way? Because that's always the two-step process with the Lord. God making the way, and then God asking us to be faithful and courageous enough to walk through. Not just to say, hey, isn't that cool that God heaped up the water, but one by one, the whole tribe, the thousands of people crossing across to the other side into the land that was unknown. They knew it was filled with enemies because they had sent the spies, and they know what's ahead. But God opening a way and saying, I've done my part, now do yours. Asking us to have the faith to walk across what God has helped us into. The Israelites weren't teleported across from one side to the other. Into the new seasons that we enter into, when God calls us, if God makes a way, just like them, he invites them, will you walk with me into the new land? As we enter into the new season, God says, will you walk with me? And what we see as God's people enter into the new land, they don't ever enter the new land alone. Right, if we read on the rest of the story, they go into the promised land, they go to Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. And they end up many battles, and they establish themselves, and they have kingdoms, and the splits. Their whole story, but God is with them in the whole story in the promised land, in the new season, in the new place. God is with them. God wasn't satisfied just to make a way and then say, have fun storming the castle. Good luck. We'll see ya. No, God travels with them into the new land. The process of crossing one season to another is a God-filled process. And so here's one of the things I want for us to just grab onto today as we reflect on this journey from slavery into the wilderness and the wilderness to the promised land, is I just want us to become people like the Israelites who are looking for God to work. Like I want us to put it on our radar that God might be making a way for us. I want us to become people that are bold enough and faithful enough to ask for God's favor. That when we know we need to end up there, but we're here and there's nothing but a flooded plain between us, to say, Lord, will you heap the waters? And maybe God will stop the waters again. Or maybe God will teach us how to swim. We don't know how we end up on the other side, how the journey begins. But to enter a season well is to enter it with an awareness that God is with us. And not in an abstract way, but in a caring way that God is going to move in our favor, to work behind the scenes. And when God makes that way, when God does bring you into a new season, make sure to grab a stone to remember. Right, grab that stone as you're passing through. Because what is our life other than a collection of the stories of the rivers that we've crossed, the places that we've been, and the people we've experienced life with? And sometimes we cross those rivers and it becomes really obvious to see God's work. Miraculous things happen. Oh, God was working there. And other times it's not that obvious. And it's not until years later that you look back and you see, oh man, God was working in that time and I didn't even know it. Either way, when we grab stones, when we grab a stone as we go into a new season, as we cross that threshold, what it does, it doesn't matter if it's an actual stone, if it's an actual physical thing that you have, if it's your karaoke trophy or whatever it is, like you can carry something, or maybe it's just a memory. But these memories become the gifts of worship to God that helps to remind us, oh, God does care for us in the new seasons. Reminds us of God's goodness. And when we take these objects, these memories, our actions become an act of praise to God. And they can serve as a witness. They can serve as a witness to ourselves when the journey is tough, but they can also serve as a witness to others on their journey as they confront rivers and they don't know that God is with them. These stones that we grab, they become stories for the generations. They become a monument to God. And quite honestly, it's such a gift. It's so cool to have these things to remember the journey that you've been on with the Lord. This week I got a text from my friend Francisco. He's a chaplain in the Navy in San Diego. Francisco went to divinity school with me, and he was part of our little gang of friends there. And I have a text thread with he and my buddy Jabe, who's a pastor. And the other day, like as I'm talking about the stones that help us to remember God's presence, he sent me a picture of a stone that he had kept. I mean, it's a piece of paper. It's a metaphorical stone. But if you see, on the top left it says 2011 Student Pastor Interview Days. Go to the next one. I zoomed in a little bit, as you see. It's nothing exciting. If you saw this, you just probably just throw it away. It's just a piece of paper from 2011. Right? But this was the beginning of my journey of becoming a pastor. If it was not for this day right here, I would not be standing here. You might not be sitting. The whole story of what God has done in my life and in Crossroads and the people that I share life with and love, all of this would not have happened had when I got to that river, if God wouldn't have made a way. And so I'm so glad that he took the stone and sent it to me this week. And they misspelled my name. It's O-U-G-H-S, but it's O-W-S. It worked out anyways. But I look at these and I see Dickerson and Kurtz and Murphy. I see Bowles and Tucker. These were strangers. I didn't know them. Right? And these are our brothers and sisters in Christ that I walked a 4-year journey across the river with. When we take these stones, it's a gift. The Lord told Joshua to take the 12 stones as a memorial because surely God knew that someday there'd be a day where Israel forgot. And they do forget where they came from. They forget about slavery in Egypt. They forget about God's promise. And the stones, those things, those moments, those artifacts, those memories, those journal entries are the reminder of God's faithfulness. It serves as a promise of God's faithfulness at the next river. And that's why crossing into new seasons, to be bold enough to ask God to show up, to ask for his favor, and then taking something to mark that, That's why it's such a gift, because it gives us something to hold on to the next time we come to a river, because we will come to a river. We will find ourselves at the next river. There is something new ahead of you. It might be next week, it might be next year, it might be 5 years. I don't know. And you don't know either. None of us do. But what we do know is that God is with us. And sometimes that trip across is hard, and the river rages. And sometimes the water heaps up and it's really easy, and we don't know why. We don't know why it's harder sometimes and easier sometimes, but when we grab that stone, it's a reminder of the places we've been. It's a reminder of the breakthrough that we've had. And it gives us the courage to move forward. To move forward with God. So may we enter this season with God's blessing. And may we take a memory to celebrate. Amen? Amen. John, you want to come up? So as I mentioned earlier, today is a day of celebration.